Hello and welcome to B Shifter. John Vance, Terry Garrison, Nick Brunacini in the house today. And it's another round of Ask the Chiefs. We had a lot of people who want to ask us questions, so we're coming with the answers today.
Strong.
Yeah. It's nice that somebody wants our advice, so we're gonna
God bless them.
Try to impart some wisdom, and at least some of the road rash we got along the way. Maybe maybe somebody wouldn't get all that road rash. How are you guys doing anyway?
Good, very good, fantastic.
Good. It's good to see you.
It's good.
Yeah,
the weather's nice and sunny, and it's beautiful in Arizona.
Yeah,
it's a Chamber of Commerce 80-degree day today.
Yes, it is.
Oh, how can you not like that, Nick?
It's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. A little nicer from the weather that I left this morning.
Yeah. Thanks for coming here and doing this.
29 degrees.
Crazy.
Left the house at 4:30, through security, and having a cup of coffee at 4:59.
Wow.
That's some good timing.
See, I didn't know there was a 4:30 in the morning, and I didn't know there was a 29 degree.
that's 2:30 in the morning your time.
No, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to ask the Chiefs, and you can send your questions in. We are still looking for questions. We'll do more of these as we go along. And if you would like to send your questions in, you can do that. Just go to the show notes, and there's an email address there. The first question, and it's to the Chiefs. That's us. He says, I love the B Shifter podcast. I've listened to some of the content multiple times. It might be a goal someday of mine to contribute or speak with you guys. Keep up the great content. Nice. I'm interested to hear about your experiencing with handling an overturned termination through arbitration. How do you maintain trust within your department after such an event? If it's an officer, do you promote those who were promoted to replace him? How do you go towards creating a positive working relationship with that reappointed member? I realize some of this is determined by civil servants, CBA language. Ours offers little or no guidance on this matter. This guy says he's a member. He's been there for over 15 years. It's a small career department. And he says these events are unfolding as he writes this. He's been contemplating if he were the chief, and he's not, or the member returning to work, which he is also not, how he would handle this unusual set of circumstances and minimize the negative impacts on the organization. Right now, the tension is palpable.
Right.
What advice do we have for SW?
SW. So, Nick, you want to start? You want me to start?
You start.
So
you guys are actual fire chiefs.
So I'll start because I've been there, right? So, that's a difficult process because it probably took a while, took a lot of energy out of the organization, or at least some people within the organization paid attention to whatever that process was, and that process probably took months, maybe even longer, maybe up to 8 months. And, the person going through this, the firefighter, he has people that support him or her and people that don't support him or her. And the fire chief, likewise, there's people that support the fact that that person was put through that process and people that'll pick the other side and say it should have never occurred. I've seen it all. I've been on that end as a fire chief and had to process somebody through that. And the reason I keep saying the word process is because it is a process. And Bruno used to say that all the time. He'd use the word process. And I thought, man, he's overusing that word. But the more I found when I was a fire chief, the more that if you just stick to the process, and really as a fire chief, you need to understand the process, the less it becomes personal for you. Right. So the last thing a fire chief can do is take it personal when somebody, for a discipline reason, gets so far in trouble that they get into the termination process. And the fire chief, in many cases I've heard fire chiefs say, well, I didn't win that one. Well, no, that's not the proper way to look at it, actually. You just got to say, hey, the process went through this process, and at the end of the day, this was the outcome. And you can't get too caught up with with feelings about the outcome in the process. It's easy to say, I know it's hard to do, but that's really my feeling on that. So just to kind of say a few more things about that, the last thing you want to do for that person coming back is what? Is to look like you're going to pick on them when they come back. I mean,
you're going to end up with problems if you do that.
There's laws against that. What's the word they use for that one?
Retaliation?
Yes.
Well,
so
this person's already demonstrated that they're lawyered up, and they just stuffed whatever discipline you administered straight up your ass.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to somehow make sense of that.
But you can't treat them. It's difficult because you don't want to treat them any different whatsoever, right? They made it through the process. They're back in the organization.
Come on now. You want to treat them, but you want to execute them.
But you can't.
No, you can't. But I mean, you're not. It's not. If you're the fire chief and you supervised the firing of this person and it got derailed and they came back to work.
Yeah,
I can see where he says that's palpable. There's going to be some tension there. I don't. Now, in a bigger fire department, you can dilute it somewhat just because of the numbers of people. But I don't know how you. That's a hard bell to unring right there.
Well, you got to. You can't unring the bell. That's my whole point. But you have to deal with that. You have to work through that. It went through the process. Your firing didn't hold for whatever reason, and now this person is going to be a part of your organization. Now everybody's going to be watching. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do, right? and you can't retaliate against them at all. If you do, then the organization's out, and that's the role of the fire chief right there. Is that to try to hold the organization together after something like that? That's a really big deal. See, but the other thing, you can't, your feelings about getting your ass kicked, as you say, you can't share that with anybody, because whatever you tell people, even if they're your most trusted confidant, they're going to tell somebody else, and then that guy's going to tell somebody else that's going to get back. So you got to, this one here, you got to swallow. You got to say, hey, it was part of the process. We lined up our documents. We lined up our investigation. We worked in accordance to the process. And at the end of the day, the board or the body that made the decision decided that person comes back. And it may be that they said, yeah, we agree with everything you're saying. This is the one I had. Is this person actually did everything you said that they did? But based on their history and their time in the organization and how long they've been there, this is not a fireable offense, even though I thought it was. Our legal department thought it was, because these kind of issues go outside the fire department too, right? Mm-hmm. And he gets his job back. It's like, man, you got to walk away for that one with kind of like kick the dirt and walk away, man. It's kind of like I think a quarterback in the NFL gets sacked. Man, when they get sacked, how do they go out and play that same? I mean, they got to go back out there again.
Yeah, but they know they're going to get sacked at some point. I mean, it's just part of the game.
Well, when you do these, go through these processes, you learn that at any time there's an outside agency or an outside board, I shouldn't say agency, an outside group of people who will look at that different than you did. And that's why you try to handle most of these without going to arbitration. You try to, and I'll tell you what we did, what worked really well for us, but it's probably not the time right now. But if you can manage both of these without going to an outside group of people who will make a decision about how you manage this, you're usually better. Not usually, you're always better off.
But there's some situations where, like, when you terminate someone, you kind of lose that ability because they're done, and the only recourse they have is to take you to court, essentially.
Well, what we did in Houston, I'm going to say it there, is that it seemed like everybody but one person that I had to terminate, we did a last chance agreement on it.
Oh, okay.
Where we brought them in, you do a louder mill, mm-hmm. You talk to them, they have their attorney there or they have their representation, we have ours, the fire chief gets all the information, or I get all the information, I make a decision, and my decision is we're going to do a last chance agreement. You can't, if you perform or do something like this act within the next 3 years, Sometimes it was 1 year. Most of the time it was 3 years. Within the next 3 years, if you do any similar action like that I can terminate you without any kind of kind of appeal process. And it worked excellent. I think I said it in one of the previous podcasts is when we did it and the guys, because they sign it, because they're in their mind, I'm not going to get caught again. Either they're not going to do anything again, which is awesome, or they're going to do something similar and they're not going to get caught again, because that's the mentality of some of these guys. And they sign that and they leave the room. And I look over at my assistant chief and I go, we'll see him back here in 6 months, right? Mm-hmm. He goes, yep. And those are firings that with no chance of appeal. Those are wonderful, right?
Yeah.
But I did have in a smaller organization, we had a guy that had to release that I thought for sure he was going to get his job back. When they started stating the facts and I started looking across the table at the group of people that were going to look at my decision, mm-hmm. and it's like, oh, this is not going well. You know,
it would be interesting to know what caused their personnel situation there, because that's going to dictate a lot of it. Is what did they do to get engaged into that whole thing? Yeah. And you could give a. So I guess it depends what you terminated them for at the end of the day. I remember there was a personnel issue. It was during my career. I think I was a captain on the fire department at the time. And it was very public and well known. And this particular individual, they sent to a mental health professional to be evaluated because there's something wrong with you. You just the way you decide things is not conducive for your own well-being. And we think you maybe have a brain tumor or something. So it was normal for the leadership of our department to send people for physical evaluations to figure out if you had some kind of physical cause of whatever your behavior issue had been. And so this gentleman goes to a mental health professional, and they end up giving him basically a card that said he was sane. So, and he was the only one on the fire department that had one of those cards. And the only reason he had it because everybody thought he was crazy. And then he found some mental health professional that agreed with him, and he gave him a card. So they said, be careful because he's got a card and you don't. Yeah. As a supervisor now. So it kind of shifted the table somewhat.
There ain't no such thing as a sanity clause.
Yeah. And this guy, this particular individual remained colorful the remainder of his career until he retired. But it was, I don't know. I guess for the betterment of the department that we all stayed together, it was, I don't know what you do with. Sometimes you get to a point where it's like, if they're staying and you're staying, you got to make peace, I guess, with the thing.
Well, when he or she comes back, you have to, you just need to treat them exactly the way you treat everybody else. You can't send them to like the death squad fire captain because that's so visible. We had an incident before I got to a department I worked in. They had an incident where they terminated somebody, or they were getting ready to terminate, and then they reached an agreement that this person was going to stay. So then that person came back to the fire department and was met by about, I'd say, a half a dozen chief officers and supervisors that sat around this person and spelled out their expectations. And it was done really poorly to where this person had a job for life, basically, because the coming back piece was so out of balance with the way that you would do everything else in the organization. Mm-hmm. They just went too far this way. It's like, you're coming back, but here's what you're not going to do. And they went through a whole bunch of stuff, and it's like, oh no, that was difficult.
So how does that conversation go? The re-entry conversation for the person who got their job back. How would you have that conversation with them?
It's you gotta have it just like you would with anybody else. You got to go through that accountability piece and say, hey man, here's the expectations. They're no different than anybody else. The one thing about the conversations for a while with this person is you always got to have a witness, right? Mm-hmm. You can't meet this person and, let's go have coffee. I've seen this done in organizations. I'm going to buddy up to them and try to, be their friend now. You can't do that. It's got to be professional. It's got to be in front of a witness, and you got to say, welcome back.
Well, I would imagine you have to document it. If the whole thing would be documented. This is written down, and we're just going to follow the script right now, Jimmy. There you go. That's it. Yeah.
And you're going to go back to your fire station or wherever you're going. And I don't know in that case whether the person, demotion does not work. Demotion's so bad. But they go back to their location. You call everybody in, or at least their supervisor calls everybody in. And there's a script that goes with that too, Nick, because, you don't want anybody doing the old code red or any goofy shit like that. So
you want me on the wall.
You need me on the wall. But it's got to be scripted, and then everybody needs to understand that the same conversation that you have with that person, you got to have with the crew. Hey guys, we're not treating this person any different. Hold them accountable. Watch what they're doing. If you see something, fix it right there. Document it. Don't be afraid to do what your job is. But at the same, don't let them get away with stuff. You just hold them accountable. And you're going to know it seemed like a very short time whether they're going to come back in adjusted or not. Most of them, what I found is the people coming back have a greater difficulty with it than the organization, right? Because either they get over it, but who gets over anything nowadays?
No, the personnel issues I had with people I supervise, if it went to the level that you had to intervene, your relationship was forever changed with those individuals. Because they pretty much knew what you thought about them during that process of discovery and everything else. And, you didn't side with me. Well, no. That's because you're guilty. Come on, buddy. You did it.
Well, you said it. That's the key. So when part of this gets fixed when you're going through a process with somebody, and and I'm certainly not perfect, and I made a lot of mistakes, but when you're taking somebody and they're getting into this process, focus on what they did wrong, whatever the infraction was, how that rule matched up, and don't say anything negative about them personally. It's like, but you did this. Here's why you're here, because you did this, or you didn't do this, or you did this too much, or whatever it is, and don't make it personal about them. So then if anything happens in the back end, it's because I think we said it. And when I was going through your dad's leadership notes, Nick, I just saw it the other day, is he was talking about some of the boss preparation and boss power and how to be a better boss. And part of that is holding people accountable when they mess up. And what he said there is, most of the time, a large majority of the time when you're dealing with somebody with a personnel issue, it's their first time. You get those repeat offenders, but they're few and far between. But it's their first time. So when you're dealing with somebody the first time, don't treat them like they're a criminal. Just focus on what they did wrong. And your dad was really good at that, right? Mm-hmm. Focus on what their issue was, and don't focus on them personally. And I know that's harder to do when you get a guy who comes in with repetitive issues, because it is him. But you got to focus on the issues or whatever.
When I was a battalion chief, you'd have a situation at a fire station that would occur where a firefighter did something to piss the captain off. And it was like the final straw. So now the captain is in the position where they're pissed off and they're going to have to deal with this personnel issue, whatever it is. So they got this bucket that they had filled up with all these little petty bullshit things that this member has been doing for the last year, 18 months, whatever it is. And now we have to fire them. They came in and they were late today and they're going to be fired. And you think, no. Let's slow down. And so as the boss of the boss, you have to show up and diffuse all that and tell them, no, like you said, this is the first time you have brought any of this up. So the way that it happened for you is you're like the mother, and it's the last straw, and now I'm going to finally deal with it. So we're not going to fire anybody. What we're going to do is come up with some kind of a schedule to that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, you go to that, set the expectations.
Well, they don't want that. No, and when I do my job, you don't support me. And you're like, no, pal. You haven't done your job for 18 months. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to support you in what your job looks like now.
No, you're absolutely right. And that whole bucket that you have not been informed about as a second level supervisor becomes one issue.
Yeah,
that's right. Or one issue that you can't do the piling on deal. I've been documenting this, and it's been in my bottom drawer now for the last 12 months. Here's all these pieces of paper. That's one issue, buddy. We start here. This is the first entry into the disciplinary process.
Well, compare it because I've had it where they call, hey, I'm having a problem with Jimmy. What's the problem? They tell you what it is, and they say, I have documented it here and here and here over the last 6 weeks. It started here. I told him to knock it off. He did this. And then so he keeps escalating it. Well, now it's a whole different thing because he did his job. The supervisor did their job in the beginning. And so now they've reached an impasse where it's not a training issue. It's not this. It's a behavior issue. So when that's the thing, that behavior issues quickly find their way out of operations and into personnel. So in the fire department I work for, personnel would have executed the final thing in this cat's question. So it was a failing of the department or whatever. Or sometimes what it is the review process is so screwed up, they'll send guilty people back. I mean, that's the other thing that can happen, is maybe the person should have been fired, and for whatever reason they weren't. I dealt with a thing as a BC where there was an older company officer who was at the end of their career and should have retired and didn't, and had been on staff because their competence was questioned in just doing day-to-day service delivery. The union took up their cause. And so they called me and said, listen, we want him to be reassigned from the staff position to this unit out in your battalion in your shift, because we think that you will be able to have better success with this individual. And this infamous person, no, nobody can. This person has been in this system now for more than 5 years for a reason. And if you want to go to all this trouble to save this individual's career, this guy's retired twice and pulled it back, there's a spot open on the same shift at your station. And if he can take mine, he can take yours, and that's the advice I'm going to give him. And he's got more seniority than you do, Mr. Personnel Control Officer. So if you're not careful, you get to work with him. Well, I never heard from him again. So I just assume he said, no, if the possibility is I have to spend all day at my station with him, I'm not going to support him. So you can see how we get to pick and choose sometimes in this thing. I don't think that answers your question all the way, but it's.
And I would say now what I've learned is that kind of this person has these issues. He needs to go here. Man, just follow whatever kind of process you have for placing people in fire stations.
Yes, exactly.
And then send supervisors and middle managers and walk through expectations with people, because what happens, that all becomes a paper trail for you treated this person special. And you may even think we're trying to do this to help this person, but when it gets in front of a board, it ends up you did that to annihilate that person. Everything you think you did was positive when you went outside a process gets turned around as a negative, you trying to get them. Mm-hmm. So just follow processes that you have in place.
Well, I think your deal with the ops chief, where you guys said, no, we'll see him again in a few months, is correct. You do. Is these people, you're not the one doing it. They are. They behave in a certain way that lands them in this position over and over again. Yeah. And they become well known in the system. They're always challenging things. And so, I mean, I think the key to it is to have a personnel system that isn't punitive, like you said, that is designed around supporting the work. And then when you get out of balance, it tries to bring you back in. So you have a better chance of, when you manage your own business, when sometimes you're going to terminate somebody. It happens. And they have the right to review it. So so long as you fought, like you said, you followed the process and dotted all the I's and crossed the T's, you're going to be good to go. I mean, that's your best defense right there. It's your only defense at the end of the day.
But It's so difficult. This is a hard question. You know, once again, we don't sit around and strategize how we're going to answer these. We like to hear them as you're asking them, so we can kind of get a better sense of what we kind of shoot from the hip, because we've had these experiences. But this organization experienced that's a very difficult situation. So one of the things that the fire chief needs, now he needs to get out in front, he or she needs to get out in front of this organizationally, and whatever infraction or whatever happened, and you said it, Nick, it's about what happened. You know, what happened there is that the fire chief needs to get out and, hey, by the way, this isn't acceptable in our organization, right? And you can't mention that person, because then it becomes you're spotlighting that guy and it seems retaliatory. But it's a good time for the fire chief to reset the expectations of the organization and say, hey, here's what we're – and there's still going to be people who say, yeah, and if I violate that, what happened? I'm going to get my job back. What they didn't mention there that I was kind of waiting for as you were reading that is the union got their job back, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the union did it. And then you got the fire chief versus the union. I've done everything in my power to eliminate the me versus the union. So when the union takes a side for a member and represents that member, that's just the process.
That's what they're supposed to do. That's what I tell them.
And I tell them that. And they've been very surprised with me on that. It's like, okay, well, that's your guys' role. You guys need to represent this person the best you can. I need to represent the organization the best I can. And we're going to take it through the process now.
You know who had the most trouble with that I've dealt with in my career was the union. Is they would come in and tell you, you know, we have to do this. We don't have a choice.
They say that a lot.
Yeah, and it's almost like an excuse they keep throwing out. You're like, well, yeah, we understand your role in the thing.
That's your role. Do the best you can.
Well, just even in a personnel matter, if I had somebody that I was going to start talking about like behavioral stuff that isn't training stuff, that was the first thing I said, gee, you have a right to a union rep right now because this is what we're going to be talking about. Yeah. Oh, this is about my behavior. Uh-huh. And most of the time they said no. I mean, no, we need to fix some things, and I think we can do that right here. The two of us now can sort this out where this is no longer an issue for me. If you will do X, Y, and Z. Usually, my experience is most of the time they're more than willing to do that then. Right. Okay, yeah, if that means I don't have to sit here and listen to your bullshit anymore. If I stop doing this and do this, yep, okay, we're good. And most of the time it worked pretty well. You wouldn't hear from them again.
Why don't demotions work?
They're permanent.
Yeah, because now you have a disgruntled employee in the organization.
Loss of status.
Yeah, if something reaches to the point where someone needs to be fired, and it gets to that point, put them in the process and fire them. You know, if it's a learning opportunity, you know, the first thing you look at is it a training opportunity? Is it a learning opportunity? Is it a customer service? What happened? And you kind of got to go through that entire process. But if you get somebody who's compliant and they want to change, that's one thing. If you get somebody who's just and honestly, there's been the one I'm talking about that I went through. Is I could have used something else in the process. I could have demoted. I could have done something else. It's like, nope, I'm taking this guy and I'm gonna fire him through the process. And then if he gets his job back, he gets his job back. But I'm gonna fire him through the process because I thought what he did was so egregious that he shouldn't have been. I didn't want the name on the back of his shirt to say that city that I was working in. So it's like, no, that person. And I knew when I put him in the process, there could have been something else, but it sends a message too. When you got a fire chief who says, yeah, we put him in the process and he got his job back, but I wasn't afraid to put him in the process. I stood by that. A board made a different decision, and he's coming back now, and now we're going to treat him this way. It sounds really black and white here. It's not as easy as I'm saying, but that's kind of the mentality you have to have. You know, towards the last couple of years of my career as a fire chief, I did something I never thought I would do, is that I spent the first 10 years of my fire chief career trying to manage issues like this as a fire chief. I'm going to keep it in-house. I'm going to manage it. I'm going to do the best I can. And I found that when something gets to a certain level, and it hits that box. Nope. Get a personnel officer, get the HR director, put them in the process, document appropriately. Because I wasn't doing them any favor, and I wasn't doing myself any favor, and I wasn't doing the organization.
So as the fire chief, you managed it like a battalion chief would, basically.
Well, you do. It gets
you have
beyond.
to.
It's like this is bigger than
you have a personnel department for a reason.
You guys manage this, make sure, because I wanted to make sure I was treating them appropriately through the process. I knew, because you're a fire, we have feelings. Legal. I knew what I want to do, but I was like, is this appropriate?
What is it? Corrective, progressive, and legal. Those are the three.
Yeah, corrective, progressive, and lawful. That's what Bruno always saw. You would ask any captain taking a test from 1982 till now. Well, maybe even Bruno left. And on every captain's test is how do you handle discipline, corrective, progressive, and lawful. Corrective is you try to correct their behavior the best you can, and that's at all levels. The progressive means you start at the lowest level of discipline. Don't jump to something that's out of range. And then lawful, treat them legally. And by lawful, we're talking about the process. Use whatever process you have. That's the legal piece. So that was a big deal. Thanks for reminding me. Most of
the personnel issues I saw during my career that ended up in the boat you're talking about was off-duty stuff.
And that's what I'm talking about.
And, there was another infamous person, and a very pretty he was a prototype for all A-shifters. He had an airplane. He worked at Food City. You know who I'm talking about. He would go to the Friday night fights and box, and the union president said he was going to take out advertising on the bottom of his shoes because he got knocked out every time. But he always had...
He looks like he could kill somebody, though.
Yeah, just the prettiest man you ever saw. But he was very capable, but when he got off duty, he had a certain lifestyle that would lend itself to being arrested occasionally and the rest. And he was a captain, and he got demoted. So you talked about demotions. And I remember the story where the fire chief had a soul-searching afternoon with this gentleman at lunch and said, you're being demoted right now. And he says, the only reason I'm doing that, because I had two choices. I could have demoted you or fired you, because we've had this conversation before. And you're very promising for what you can do for the fire department, but your self-destructive behaviors are keeping you from this.
Yeah.
And he said, so we're going to demote you right now. And if your behavior improves, he says, all this will slowly go away as you start to practice self-discipline. And that's what happened is over a period of the next year or two. So he didn't go out he didn't lawyer up or any of that, and he could have. I mean, he had the resources, and he's a very intelligent person that knew the legal system. And he just went along and said, okay, you're right. And so it really was more like fatherly guidance and advice that they didn't fight back from. And it saved the guy's career at the end. He went on to become a deputy chief before it was all over, and he would create training content with like graphs on it that would cause seizures because it had so many brightly colored lines showing, where things were. So he became part of the leadership of the fire department eventually, which was good.
Just don't have a beer with him after duty.
Oh, I'd love drink. I was his bartender for a while. So, in fact, we found a picture of this. Go do it, Vance.
I don't know how to get there.
Oh, we'll get there. We're going to show you some union activities here in a minute.
Nice.
Fueled by alcohol.
Well, the other part about that corrective, progressive, and lawful that I was thinking when you were talking to Nick is and consistency is the key to is how has the organization dealt with similar issues in the past, right? And make sure you line up
precedent.
With that. Yeah,
you'd hear the union always say precedent. What's the precedent?
Union love precedent. So when I went to the city here in the West Valley. Prior to me getting there, there's an incident where, and it's too long to explain, but a firefighter slugged somebody on a gurney. That person was swinging at them and spitting at them, and there's a video, and a firefighter slugged the person on the gurney. Mm-hmm. And so the precedent was, well, hell, you could slug people on a gurney and not get fired here. But it was a different fire chief, and he was doing what he thought was right. And when I was there, it's like, yeah, you can't slug people on a gurney. You know, what other options do you have? Take a step back. Mm-hmm. They're tied to a gurney. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or, you know, I don't want our firefighters to be subjected to anybody spitting or hitting them.
Yeah, there comes a combat thing where at some point it crosses into mutual, but it's de-escalate.
Step 2 feet away and call the cops or whatever that is. But I guess that precedent is a big deal. And but once again, I found that when it got to a certain level, when I heard certain phrases being used, especially like some of those EEOC, discrimination, retaliation, sexual behavior. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I'm going to get my HR director involved in this. I'm going to have to do it. And
see, I think a lot of that happens when you stray from the work. I mean, we keep going back to the work and all this leadership stuff we're doing. So we come on duty to perform the work, basically. You know, the public safety firefighter routine is what we do. And there's a lot of things that detract us socially from that, just during the course of a shift in a fire station and other places. So I think it becomes incumbent on the leadership and the bosses and supervisors to kind of keep guard against that, because you want it to be fun to come to work, but then you don't want it to become a fraternity. So we all have to be, everybody should have a good time in a fire station. Yeah. Now, you say that, and then, you know, after midnight, you're all crying every time the lights come on. So it's a shared kind of an experience there.
Commisery.
Well, and there's stressful things that happen during the course of a shift, and that can affect people's behavior during the shift. So, but that's the other part of it, is that can't be the excuse, because we see this kind of stuff all day. So if every time you see something that's emotionally fragmenting, that you just fall to pieces, you don't want a firefighter crying 8 times a shift. That's dysfunctional. So it's kooky.
So back to this deal, just one last thing is that so the fire chief has to get out in front of this. You can't hunker down and act like it didn't occur.
That's it.
Oh, there you go. Is that up net right now?
Yep. Yes, he found it.
Well, were you bartending then? Was that?
I think I was I had maybe a year or 2 on the fire department.
Mason jar. You're like
that's a mason jar beer. It's a taco bus.
Aren't you 12 years old in that picture?
That could have been.
I love it.
Yeah, there's that green grass of home right there. There's somebody who should have been fired right out of the gate.
See that hand on your shoulders trying to protect you from yourself. Don't do it, Nick.
They're getting ready to throw me to chokehold. Sleeper hold.
Don't do it, Nick.
Hey now.
I've been involved in the in demotions. And they never worked out.
No,
never worked out. That's why I asked that.
No, I don't know.
You've got an enemy for life. The firings I've been involved with mostly had to do with criminal activity, and usually the criminal activity was upheld. You know, they were convicted of something, or if they would have been a part of the fire department process, they would have been incriminated to the point that there would have been criminal charges. So they select themselves out at that point. They're like, I'm done with this career. I'll go drive a tow truck.
But once again, sometimes the board will say, yeah, that was a very inappropriate thing to do, but is it worth firing? And that's a question they have to ask. And they do, because you got to remember, they have, when you sit in front of these civilian boards, and that's what they are in these cases, is that they have pretty high expectations of us. They have higher expectations of us than we actually have sometimes. Like, they see us for what we were in 1974 with Gage and DeSoto, or whatever that is, right? So that was not overturned, but it was the same thing. Let's see how this gets processed out. But I've had one that was overturned, and you gotta. You just gotta look at it as we went through that process. Now here's a good question for organization, fire chiefs. Can you create a process? We do that. You know, the best time to have a Mayday is when you're training and you go through a Mayday simulation. Can you create a process? That's a really good question what that person says. why don't we get together and decide if we ever have to go through this, how's it going to look like in our organization when we bring somebody back? Is there 4 or 5 steps that we need to go through? Is there a communication process? Is there a retraining process? Is there a re-engagement process? Now, if you went to that with an HR director or somebody and said, we actually have a process to bring them back, and they look at it and they go, maybe you even get legal to look at it and go, oh, yeah, that's a great process. Use that.
No, that's kind of goofy. Okay, we're going to have a process for when our process of getting rid of people fails to bring that person back. I think you're spending your time in the wrong place.
No, it doesn't have to be a long, big, drawn-out deal, but should you have a discussion? Maybe you have somebody going through a process and you start talking about how we're going to bring them back.
I think the harder question is, let's say that you fire somebody for cause, and it's like they needed to be fired, and they go through the review process, and they say, no, they're coming back. If I was to fire, I'd say, no, they're not. I'm not hiring them back. Good luck. Well, you have to. We're ordering you to. Well, I don't know what to tell you, but
so I don't. Nick, I don't know if there's a lot of fire chiefs who would pick that. That's not where I'm going to take a sword to myself. Now, I would do it on a firefighter safety or customer service issue, something that was the 4-person staffing. But I don't know if you don't want to lose your job because of that one. That would be difficult.
But you guys are from larger systems for the most part.
We'll play what if till the end. It's like a suicide pact.
But if you're in a smaller department and say you're a 50 personnel department, and I know a chief is going through this right now.
Oh.
And they had the union president got fired, and it was I'm not going to go into the details, but
you said enough.
Talking to the chief,
that's a tough one there.
Talking to the chief, he said if he gets his job back, I'm gone. Because he goes, at that point, I've lost control of the organization. I'm going to be disempowered, issue, right? And this guy will come back empowered. Like, well, I stood up to the chief and won.
Well, there's a whole lot going on in that organization.
See, that's a different thing altogether. Yeah. Throughout my career, the union fought physical fitness standards. And you'd ask them why. Why are you fighting us being in better shape? They said, because that's not what it's about, is they're going to use that to fire the union officials. That's what happens across the fire service. And you would see, and they would point out that this is where it's happened before, here and here and here. And you're like, Jesus Christ, he's right there. This is, the chief used you said, consistency. Well, no, I'm going to just fire you because you're 20 pounds overweight and you're the union president. So that became an issue for them on the international. I mean, they said when they were doing 1,500, that became part of the negotiation in the thing. They said, why are you doing this? So firefighters live longer. And so it took a while for them, and then they became copacetic. Al Whitehead and Alan Brunacini, that's where the standard came out of.
Well, even the fitness plan for Phoenix was non-punitive. It was a non-punitive fitness plan.
Well, and but it progressed to the point, because it was for everybody's best interest, that the doctor would pull people out of the field and say, no, you're too sloppy. You got to get in better shape to be a firefighter. Blah, 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 blah. And they'd scream and yell. They'd lose 25, 30 pounds. They'd be back at duty. He said, greatest thing ever. I shouldn't have fought it. It was, I'm fit again and I feel better. And, that whole happy story is the way that one ended.
I think the last comment I had about this is the just culture piece, where if you're having issues within your organization where you're routinely either firing people or having the need to demote them, you really have to look in the mirror and figure out what's going on within the organization to cause this. What are your SOPs like? Yeah. What do you teach people your culture when you bring them in? What's your screening look like? Are you putting people through psychological assessments? Right now, my police department, and we want to start doing the same thing. They're doing this checkup from the neck up every year because of some of the issues police officers have had. And I've talked to the counselor that's doing it, and she recommended that the fire department does that too, which I totally agree with. So you take all those pieces and parts, and that's what makes a department where you don't have this happen on a regular basis. But I see departments that regularly fire and demote, and it's like there's something within that organization that it's causing that. Yeah. And you really cannot blame the individuals unless, the hiring is just completely out of whack and you're hiring anybody that puts in an application, which isn't the case for most departments, but
the
culture matters.
Like the person who wrote that, you would hope that that's that person is asking that because it doesn't happen very often, and now it happened, and now what do we do?
It's such an anomaly.
Yeah.
And I think that was the point I was trying to make, is that so out of bounds that you would even have a system for reincorporating somebody that you wanted to fire and couldn't.
Maybe you're right.
And I think that's part of the hiring thing, like Vance said. We did some work with the fire department, and they mid-size and well thought of, most places outside, and you got to talking to them about their hiring practices, and they said, well, if we have 20 vacancies for firefighters, we hire 40 people for the academy. You think, why do you do that? He says, because we're going to fire half of them. So you go into it, and he's explaining this to my father, who's like, what the hell are you talking about? Because on every dynamic, you're wasting money. It costs you twice as much to train a group. You get rid of half of them, and those people are going to come back and try to recycle through. Why do you do that? He says, because the ones that make it through really feel good about themselves. It pumps them up. Oh, and you're like, so what you're doing is you're killing people to make everybody feel better that survived. You think this is, they start the Stockholm Syndrome in the academy. And you think they're going to have some issues in the personnel world, and they do. The more you learn about them, you think, Jesus. Well, you do it from the moment they start.
That fish stinks from the head down.
Exactly. And the fire chief, he's like, I don't know. We've just done it forever. It's always the way we've done things. And they were afraid. He said, I don't know. We could change it. And you're like, well.
Yeah, you could change it.
Yeah, it's going to be the thing. And it ended up, I think the fire chief left sooner than he wanted to. And he was a nice guy, but the system just ate him alive.
Yeah, the drill masters, Louis Gossett Jr., spraying people down with garden hoses.
Mayonnaise.
Yeah, Mr. Mayonnaise. Okay, SW is getting an OG IC T-Shirt for sending that question in.
Tell them not to wear that to work.
Yeah, they'll pick you out right away.
Well, Vance, I don't know if we've answered this question. We may have just confused them.
I don't know. We did.
There isn't a clear answer to it. I mean, it's a screwed up thing.
There's some questions that get asked by people that aren't the fire chief, and it's like the fire chief needs to just take that. Hopefully, the fire chiefs are listening to some of these answers because they need to. But I was thinking about, Nick, when you said it. Maybe I am kind of a goofy guy. They probably don't need to develop a process, but when you look and maybe when somebody comes back, maybe you go then to your HR and your legal and say, okay, this person's coming back. Help us out. We need help. It may be something where a fire chief or an organization says, this is going to be very uncomfortable. Maybe we need to look for help. So he's asking us. Maybe we're not the best people to help him. But
well, I think the other part of that you need to look at is how did because that's a failure of the system at that point, is we're doing something wrong. Yeah. Now, and it could be that you think, no, the board that decided it was corrupt for whatever reason, and they just made the wrong decision, because that happens sometimes too. I mean, there's stupid judges everywhere. So it's part of the landscape that we have to negotiate in the thing.
No, I found when you get a group of civilians and they're on a board, hang on.
Well, I just talked to a fire chief the other day, and he said he was called in by the fire board just so they would let him know that we're your boss. And he says that's the only reason. We just think you need to know that we're in charge. Yeah, great. Thanks.
Let's do one more question.
No.
Before we go.
I quit.
Forget about it.
Hopefully we'll help this guy out a little better.
Talk to my lawyer.
I don't know. Sorry, guy.
I'm filing arbitration. I want another question. All right. This one is from Big B. Remember, we're anonymous here. We don't want to call anybody out. But
the Big Bopper.
Yeah. Good morning, brothers. I'm about halfway through my career, but unfortunately losing passion for the job. I've tried to fuel up the passion by taking on new roles, training, and specialties, but it's not working. What advice do you have for someone who still has a way to go and wants to be on the right side of the path?
Did we just answer this one last week? Wasn't this the last one?
No. I don't think so.
No.
I don't know.
I sent it to you guys, but we haven't answered it yet.
Can you cut this part out where I just said
No, it's got to be it.
I don't know. Yeah, they're all out of order.
Yeah, and let's just recharging your batteries. How as a leader, as somebody who consistency is key. I think for somebody in our positions. So how do you keep that consistency and that drive going?
Well, that guy that I just asked that, God bless that guy, because he actually realizes that he needs to recharge batteries. I think it's those son of a guns that don't realize it. Maybe I was there at a point in my career. It was like, you don't even realize that you're phoning it in half the time as a leader or whatever, or supervisor, or even as a firefighter. You're just showing up and getting through the motions. So this person actually realizes, man, I need to recharge. That's a big deal right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So...
yeah, I mean, throughout your career, that happens. And, I promoted, and that made it fresher each time you did that. When we started, everybody wanted to be a captain. Like in the academy, if we could have graduated as captains, that's what we would have done. Captain paramedic, because that was you were the leader of men, and you could date a nurse. It was perfect. So you became a captain early, and I had this view at that time that I was always going to be in the field as a company officer. Yeah. So I was going to just retire as, Captain Old Guy at some point. And I started to run into that cat's issue with just the people that I was working for mostly. And, and you're kind of stymied. You're like, I've hit the limit of what I can do here, and I feel like I need to be somewhere else and do something else. I don't want to go on another EMS call this week, and so you get into that corner, and you think, no, I got to. And for me, it was like, no, I got to take the Chiefs test. And at that point, when I took that, nobody was taking Chiefs test. There was less than double digits taking it most of the time. If you had 10 or 11, you thought, woo, what happened this year? Boy, we're going to have to get a bigger room. So it was just a horrible, nobody wanted that job. And you thought, well, I'm done doing this one. I need a change. And that really did it for me, is I found out that BC was I've said this before, it was my favorite gig in the whole thing. So, and that re-energized me. And that put me in a place, because it changed. There was a huge difference between being a company officer and then being a battalion chief. The biggest difference that I had during my course of the fire department was that. And people talk about that, and they fear that, is I'm no longer going to be part of the company. I lose my identity. My stake is the big brother in this thing, or whatever it was, and now I'm them. I've become them. And I thought, Jesus, if I knew them was like this, I would have become them when I left the academy. And you had some people, in fact, that's another one of your questions about the seniority thing, is we had a system where it was common that the captains had seniority over the BCs. Just because of that dynamic, especially the younger, more upward, the Danny Becks of the world and the rest of them, 10 years in their chiefs. Yeah. Where for most of us, it was at least 15 years in the field before you're promoted. So that is, just speaking from my own experience, that's what did it for me and changed it. And I re-engaged then, and really that kind of fueled up to where I'm at today. If I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't be sitting here with you guys. This building wouldn't be here, or I wouldn't be in it. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of what did it. And it forced me to become more, for lack of a better word, an adult in the thing. Okay, this is what this should look like. And
for lack of a better word. Liar!
Yeah. Well, I was still a juvenile.
You were an adult.
Yeah. Adults don't always wear pants in the command post. It happens, man. So
there's some crazy adults out there. We are.
Exactly.
We are the adults.
Well, they're easier to work for, I find. Yeah. Oh, well, if he could do it, anybody can.
Is that your dad drunk? Go home, Grandma, you're drunk. Yeah. She's an adult. Leave her alone.
Yeah, exactly. She's wearing her purse like the hat.
So the reason I thought we already answered this question, I'm going to go back to this again, because I remember talking about I would leave a fire station. That's one thing that I couldn't do. I couldn't stay at a fire station for more than 2.5, 3 years. Mm-hmm. Where I felt like I was stale. I like the people there, but it's like, I only have 10 jokes. And if I say them over and over again, somebody's going to get tired of me. So I got to go to a new place with the new 10 jokes that I had at the time. But
so every time you married a new woman, you went to a different station.
I didn't go to that many stations.
Okay. Well, you weren't married. Okay. Yeah, that's the first date, let's say.
If my wife is listening, sorry, babe. 29 years, Nick. Same joke she has to look at.
Yeah, well.
But that's what I did. I would kind of get bored and stale, and I would go to a new fire station, new people, and they kind of engage you a little bit. They have different social issues and different things going on, and I don't know. It seems like sometimes you could get around people that are really negative, right? Have you ever been at a fire station when you're a firefighter? Like everybody, like Nick said, everybody's been through a divorce. They all hate women. They're all driving last year's whatever car they can get because their child support's sucking up every dime they got. And you go to the fire station, it's just nothing but just like
there's a crew.
I saw that.
I'm sure he shared that with you too.
That's beautiful. Nick showing me a picture of 4 firefighters around a stuffed donkey.
Oh, yeah. That's
hope that's not a real donkey.
I think 3 of the 4 people in that picture are probably dead. No, they all may be alive. Well, no, only one of them's dead.
Yeah, only one of them.
Yeah.
But
I was going to try to airdrop it to myself. But
help us out.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten to that situation because of my environment, where I was burned out and wanted to move on. And it was mostly because of who I was working for and not just because of the job. And I know the job gets you down. I mean, I've had that too, but it's usually the environment that you're in. And, we can choose to have a good attitude every day that we come in. We can choose to make the job fun in most of the cases when we're not running calls. And if you can live in that kind of environment, it's going to be a great career. Now, if you have a boss that thinks, FEMA's setting up death camps and the rapture is going to happen at any moment, which I've had before, that's not fun coming to work every day, and you need a change. And sometimes you just need a change, whether it's not within your organization. If you're a smaller organization, I needed a change. I had to move 800 miles away. You've had to move 800 miles away to get that change that you needed. So, and that is putting your big boy pants on and realizing for the good of your organization, it's time for you to move on. Unfortunately, people get fed up and stay. They don't get fed up and leave. Right. And they'll continue to want to bank their pension and all the other things that keep us in the job. But, often that isn't the right thing to do.
No. Just change your focus a little bit.
Live through all of it. Yeah, it's hard to manage potato cannons. It always ends badly.
I'm gonna say something goofy, and people are going, freaking Garrison. Take a class. Learn something new about the organization, or learn something new about your job, or just, a lot of times when people re-engage, the best way to re-engage is you get in a classroom with a group of people that are all kind of have a common goal. Take a promotional exam. That's a deal that gets your focus away from whatever it is you're involved with. But you got to change your focus. You got to look at everything a little bit.
That was the nice thing about working for a big fire department, is there was more opportunities to do that. There were a couple times in my career where there were special assignments that you could do things that you were interested in, and it wasn't permanent, and you didn't have to give your spot up. So it kind of re-energized you, because you were working a different schedule, and you were doing a different set of things and looking at it from a different set of eyes almost. Yeah. And then those became things that you would capture like professionally and occupationally that would drive you a little further ahead of people. So over a period of time, as it just made sense, okay, I've done this and this and this, I really probably should promote now. Yeah. Because when you're just kind of second guessing what the IC is doing and thinking, Jesus Christ, what is it? It's like, well, and you would talk to your people you respected in the organization about it, and they're like, yeah, that's 100% right. They shouldn't have done that. And it's as much your fault as his, because you look where you're working. Yeah. So the captains don't take command. You do in the beginning, but you're on a ladder. They never take command of anything. You just go off and destroy shit. That's good, but we want to do that within the scope of having a positive outcome. And he says, well, you're never going to have it when you're working for that idiot. And you think, well, you can, but you have to violate every order he gives you to get there. And you're like, so then it becomes a deal like, well, they're right. This is I'm the problem now. So it's like you say, put up or shut up, man. That's
well, you
what it is.
you gotta make the change. It's not going to come from something externally. Nobody's going to make the change for you. If you feel like, especially this person, they feel like that they can sense that, that's a positive thing for them. Now, what are they going to do to now not go deeper into that, whatever that is, and change it. Take a class. I became an arson investigator at one time. I took I never thought about it, and I was kind of like, I kind of want to move away from this paramedicine deal for a while. So I went through the arson investigation class, and that worked out really well.
Well, as an IC, it gave you another set of information and knowledge that the rest of us didn't have, because we didn't look at cause and determination and flow paths. You guys were ahead of the science with everyone. In fact, that's kind of who figured out when the science started coming out that, we've made some mistakes. Yeah, exactly. There's people in jail that are going to get out now because that was right. But that's who recognized it first, were people like you.
Yeah.
That's what makes the service better. It progresses it to the next step.
Yep.
Well, we're out of time, because if Terry wants to continue his 29-year marriage, he needs to be out of here in just a few minutes. So.
Well, and
all right, fellas, it's been fun. Oh, Big B gets an OG IC T-shirt.
Big B, do something different. If you feel that, go out and engage. Do something different, man. Don't keep going down that hole of whatever you're feeling there. Turn a corner.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We appreciate you listening to B Shifter. Remember, tell a friend, leave your comments. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Hit the subscribe button. We appreciate it. And we'll do more questions next time. Thanks for listening to B Shifter.